Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Tonight, I'm here with my friend, Dee Pierce, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends.
Hello, everyone.
And the topics we're going to cover tonight are Pepe Escobar on BRICS, Oreshnik, what happened at the G20, and Jeff Sachs on the impact of donor corruption here, in the United States. So I see I've forgotten to do one little thing, which I'm going to do now, which is put my banner across the bottom, my Buy Me a Coffee banner.
And I'm sharing right now. We have to remember to share.
Yes, we do. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, let everybody know that we're here. We're live.
I am going to share as well. Yeah, it looks like we got a few people who've joined from Facebook.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's fine. Since we just started, that's fine. Okay, so here we are. I have a bunch of people already, but no one has commented yet, so we don't know who's here.
Okay.
But let us start with the first, of Pepe's articles. It's on BRICS. Okay, Dee is going to read that for us, and we'll be commenting while she does.
Okay.
I'll,
Sounds good.
I'll put the article up, and should be seeing it now. Do you see it?
Yes, I do. I see it.
Okay, great.
Okay. Here we go. Pepe Escobar. The BRICS Spirit alive and well in South Africa. Oh, yes, it is. That's good news. Africa now essentially needs political will to fight infrastructural problems, a human capital deficit, and an institutional deficit. Johannesburg. At the APEC, the APAC APEC annual summit in Lima, Comrade Xi Jinping was practically coronated as the King of Peru.
I think the real term for that is crowned.
Yeah. As a lively, movable feast celebrated the brand new 1.3 billion Chiangkai Shanghai Maritime Silk Road across the Pacific.
But I think Chankay is the port in Peru, right? That was built by the Chinese
Yes, I believe so.
for the Peruvians. It's colorful to name it the Maritime Silk Road across the Pacific.
There could hardly be a more auspicious counterpart to the action in South America than to gather in BRICS member South Africa to discuss African unity in a multipolar world, as well as the perennial plagues of racism, fascism, Russophobia, and other forms of discrimination. The meetings were coordinated by the movement Russophile International (MIR), who was not only Russophile but most of all multinodalophile. Okay.
Yes, multimodal file.
Okay, here the picture underneath the picture it says it's as if this was an extension of the memorable BRICS 24 summit in Kazan.
Yes, and it's interesting. Pepe Escobar is right there,
Hmm.
on your left in the picture.
Yes, I see him. It's as if this was an extension of the memorable BRICS 2020. Oh, yeah, I just read that. In Kazan, BRICS de facto expanded out of 9 members, adding 13 member partners and reaching 22 nations. Saudi Arabia, an immensely complex case, remains on the fence. BRICS Plus now largely surpasses the waning influence of the G20, whose annual summit is ongoing in Rio, at least focused on social issues and the fight against poverty and hunger, and not war. Still, the crisis riddled G7 NATO stand did try to hijack the agenda. Of course. Why not?
Why not, indeed?
The real decolonization starts now. For all practical purposes, and borrowing from one of Chi's metaphors, BRICS Plus has already set sail exploring the lineaments of a new, just, fair world order. In Johannesburg, the sterling analytical quality of South African interlocutors, plus contributions from Mali and Senegal, was a source of pure joy. The tone was realist, critical, hopeful, ranging from Nambula Makone, chairperson of the African National Congress (ANC) International Relations Committee, and a firm supporter of Palestine, Gaza, Cuba, and Western Sahara, to former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Kozana Dlamini Zuma, from Sekela, Sekela Mangagala, an entrepreneur and graduate of the Belarusian State Agrarian University, to extremely accomplished media entrepreneur and receiver of special prize at a BRICS forum in Sochi, Nkululeko Natula, from Sengalese Soliman, Nadia, Deputy Secretary General of the International Russophile Movement, to Mali's Amadou Gambi, from crack geopolitical analyst Joe Masala to former diplomat Botsang Mola, an heir to the royal aristocracy of Botswana and Lesotho, and a man of unbounded energy.
Those African names were extremely difficult.
Yes.
I think you did a very good job of trying to decipher them.
Thank you. Unequal Africa in numbers is always a staggering proposition, inviting deep reflection. What could be defined as the Big Five? Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and South Africa are responsible for no less than half of Africa's GDP. 3 of these are now full BRICS members, and the other 2 are BRICS partners. Pretoria-based legal expert Dr. Andre Thomasthausen provided extra startling figures. Africa, with 20% of the Earth's landmass, in which China, India, US, and Europe could easily fit, and 30% of the globe's natural resources, including critical minerals such as lithium, not to mention 17% of the world's population, 1.3 billion people, accounts for only 2.8% of the world's GDP.
Yeah, I suppose I should mention here that when you talk of the Big Five, uh, population of Nigeria is about 220 million. The population of Egypt is about, I guess, 115 million. So those 2 countries alone are just about equal to the population of population of the United States.
Mm,
Then there's Ethiopia with another 110 million, if I recall correctly. And so we're looking at, with Algeria, we're probably looking at a total of 500 million people, okay, in those countries, 500 million out of the 1.3 billion in all of Africa.
Hmm.
So they are by far, I think, the most important nations, okay, inside of Africa. And the most important of those nations, population wise, is Nigeria. Not
Okay.
many people in this country realize Nigeria has 220 million people, which is more than, say, Brazil, just to put this in context. Very, very important country. Okay, please go on.
Okay, go down a bit. Go up a bit or whatever. Down. Yeah. The first paragraph I'm missing.
Okay, the conclusion, okay, is
No,
inevitable.
before that. Before that.
Okay, I thought you already read that, but
Oh,
that's
did
fine.
oh yeah, I did read that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The conclusion is inevitable. The IMF and the World Bank ultimately failed Africa. In 2025, Africa will be home to no less than 8% of the world's poor. A new Pan-Africa development model away from Bretton Woods system is beyond imperative, and Russia has all it takes to play a leading role. No African nation implemented or enforced Western sanctions on Russia, as Tamathiasian recalled at the 2023 St. Petersburg Economic Forum. President Putin offered to donate grain to African nations and later did not condemn military coups in West Africa, unlike the African Union, totally understanding the anti colonization drive. Russia is strategically replacing France in West Africa and strongly supports the alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. Thomas noted that even as Russia's involvement in Africa lags compared to other powers, Moscow managed to accumulate considerable soft power with only 5% of Chinese investments, creating political leverage with deals in agro industries, security, nuclear energy, and mining. Quote, it has all but eliminated French influence. Its security services offering have trumped US and EU. That's positive.
It is.
Shaping a new blueprint. One of the key themes of the discussions in Johannesburg was Africa's civilizational rule. The inestimable Professor Zhang Weiwei from Fudan University's China Institute reaffirmed the quote, four evils fought by China: racism, Islamophobia, Russophobia, and Sinophobia when it comes to shaping an quote, African civilization community. He suggested lessons to be learned by transposing the ASEAN Asian model, the Southeast Asian consensual way. As Professor Zhang formulated, quote, while rules rule Europe, win-win rules Asia. That's cool. The key point when shaping a cultural civilization structure is strategic patience. Two steps forward, one step back. In Asia, China supports ASEAN centrality. Compare it with NATO, which bases itself on divide and rule. The lesson for Africa is to invest in institutionalized cooperation. This could be an inspiration for Africa. Amadou Gambi from Mali extolled the great Mali Empire of the 13th century in parallel now to, quote, brave young soldiers bringing Mali to itself within the association of the Sahel states. Another key point of all discussions, as those who control the narrative control the future and also the past. The great challenge for Africa is, quote, the decolonization of the mind, as stressed by several South African scholars.
And that is so important. And it's
Yes.
obviously what is going on today in spades. There's
Hmm.
a lot of decolonization of the world on in,
Yes.
in Africa.
Roman Abarov, a planetarian ambassador of Russia in BRICS partner South Africa, chaired a U-table on African unity in a multipolar world. Significantly, right off the bat, he quoted Putin, quoting Nelson Mandela, quote, "How many times I stood up after I fell." Yes, yes, that's a good point.
It's a great quote.
That led Dr. Nakasana to address the most torturous challenge: how to conform politically united Africa. It helps, she said, that, quote, "our most precious resource is people, and they are young, educated with skills." Dory Rudd, chief economist of the Efficient Group, summarized the geoeconomic challenge: the need for a currency for all of Africa, quote, "with a big capital market behind, that could be linked to increased connectivity, the building of new cities and industries, and a renewed leadership." Professor Zhang,
I
wait,
suppose,
what's that?
okay, I suppose I have to comment here that if they want the currency for all of Africa, they should pay close attention to the European model, okay, because they developed a single currency for all of the EU, and it has resulted in constraining the flexibility of the individual nations
Yes, it did.
uh, to adjust uh, 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 to economic cycles. And that kind of flexibility is so important, okay, to all nations. I don't think I would rush to form a new currency for all of Africa if I were them.
No. Professor Zhang Weiwei once again focused on the China model as, quote, "unite and prosper," focusing on, quote, "people's livelihood first, with tangible results." He qualified Putin as, quote, "a true revolutionary," in contrast with China since Deng Jinping as reformist, and recalled when China had a lower per capita income than Malawi.
Yeah, that wasn't really so long ago. I guess it was uh, probably in the early 80s. That was probably true.
Uh-huh.
Very interesting.
Mhm. China then carried out, quote, "essential revolutions" as the social index went up. That was the foundation for subsequent development. As for the model, it's, quote, "selection, not elections." The Communist Party of China is holistic. Deng said yes to economic globalization, but selectively, and no to political globalization.
A very interesting distinction, but correct. That is what happened.
A key theme for most speakers is that building Africa unity leads to African agency, from geopolitical recipient to geopolitical actor, with non alignment intimately linked to the pursuit of autonomy. Out of 55 nations, 27% of the UN, no less than 28 African nations were colonized by France. Finally, real post-France decolonization is on the move. Yes, it is. Mali's Amadou Gambi focused on the exhilarating history of African unity addressed step by step that will eventually transform into competitive advantages and Africa's capacity to negotiate as a collective. As Sekelela Magala stressed, the quote, "new blueprint should be created by Africa using, for instance, BRI to get advantages and BRICS as a as a major tool."
I should mention here that the BRI is the Belt and Road Initiative.
Okay. A consensus emerged among all African participants that Africa now essentially needs political will to fight infrastructural problems, a human capital deficit, and an institutional deficit. So institutions must be fixed in parallel to the process of fighting against cultural recolonization. It was up to the redoubtable Cynthia McKinney, backed by her 6 terms at the U.S. Congress, to introduce a note of deep realism. Africa may now be on the road to affirm itself, but no one should be fooled. What happened to Gaddafi was just a sample of how far the usual suspects are willing to go to prevent African agency. The new political leadership must be fully aware that the deeper they go, quote, they run the risk of being killed.
I guess I'd like to comment on that too, but what I want to say in response to this article, I think it shows how much the African countries are together and how much they're seeking developmental change and decolonization, which is, of course, extremely important. Okay, about Cynthia McKinney's comment, I think she's right to point to the danger, but it's also true that when the West got rid of uh, 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 um, okay, when they bombed in Libya, okay, and got rid of the head of Libya, uh,
Mm,
uh, uh, Gaddafi. Uh, that was before Russia became as powerful, okay, as it is today. And it was also true that at the time, most of the African countries still, okay, were under the thumb of various Western nations. Conditions, are different now. Now that doesn't mean that the undercover agencies of the United States are not going to try to kill people and turn things back to a previous time.
hmm
They certainly will. On the other hand, with the help of Russia, okay, and with the help of the nations of Africa, especially the Big Five, becoming so strong, it's going to be much more difficult for the United States to pull off the kind of stunt uh, uh, they pulled off in Libya,
hmm
in North Africa. The Russians are militarily far stronger now, than they were in Hillary Clinton's time.
hmm
And I think it would be much more difficult for the United States to pull off the kind of stunt they did there going forward. And I think that's a very, very hopeful kind of indication that this time the Africans will be successful in their efforts at, decolonization. So I am probably more optimistic than Cynthia McKinney
Okay.
about this. Okay, let's go to the second piece. I guess I do want to comment here also and say that uh, where else could we get this kind of news except from Pepe Escobar?
That's true.
Because who else is traveling around the world, going to every conceivable conference of significance, and coming back with stories about uh, such a conference? I mean, it's like he's the only source.
hmm
It's truly amazing.
Okay, do you want to go through some of the comments here?
Sure.
Just a few of them I see.
Yeah, it's good since we have some. Robert Copeland is back to tell us BRICS is not as strong as everybody thinks it is. Uh, yeah, I think Pepe realizes that. course, he's very enthusiastic about the future, but I think he tends to be realistic about the difficulties that BRICS faces. Robert says, I noticed BRICS is not talking about the problems each BRICS nation are having now, internally and externally. Well, it would be hard to do that in a short article focused about this particular conference. But I think he is aware of the problems. Robert says Russia is a lot weaker now than when they attacked Ukraine in early 2022. That I certainly don't agree with Robert. I think they're a lot stronger now than when they attacked Ukraine
Mhm.
in early 2022. And that brings us to a very good segue to Pepe's article on the Oreshnik, because if there's any relevant measure of the strength of Russia, the military strength of Russia right now, it's the invention and deployment of of the Oreshnik. So here we are, Oreshnik, the 3 kilometer per second plot twist. This was from Pepe on November 22nd, 2024. Oh, the first article was originally published at the Strategic Culture Foundation. This article, let me go to the end and find out where it was originally published. It was originally published at Sputnik, uh, but picked up at uns.com. So here is a hypersonic. Uh, I suppose that's supposed to be a hypersonic missile, but there's no caption on it really. But Pepe starts, nothing to see here, just a hypersonic demo. Well, not really. The average American is only capable of making some sort of sense of the world through movies. So let's go back to a classic, the opening sequence of Coppola's Apocalypse Now,
Mhm.
the Vietnam War counterpart to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness set in the Congo. In the movie, Captain Willard, Martin Sheen, is barely capable of enacting a drunken soliloquy alone in his room in Saigon. He's waiting for his assignment, a special mission, all the way to the heart of darkness, in the movie represented by the illegal American incursion, indiscriminate bombing of Cambodia. Willard, in the VO, I'm not sure what the VO is exactly, did he say? I think that must be his room back in the hotel.
Right.
Barely mutters, quote, every minute I stay in this room, I get weaker and Charlie gets stronger, unquote. Charlie out in the jungle was how the American GIs referred to the Viet Cong. Yes, I remember that well. Cue from the quote, um, American War, unquote, how the Vietnamese refer to it, to the U.S. NATO proxy war in Ukraine. The American empire is now a drunken captain facing the revamped jungle, as qualified by that stupid Spaniard, Burrell, the exiting EU foreign policy, quote, chief, unquote. Every minute Captain stays in his decrepit garden, the counterpart to a seedy room in Saigon, Charlie out in the jungle gets stronger. What's even more ominous is that Charlie now is not the Viet Cong. Charlie now is nuclear hypersonic Russia. Captain America believed it would intimidate Rusky Charlie with the quote authorization unquote straight out of the deep state for Ukraine to attack targets inside the Russian Federation with ATACMS. Such attacks had already happened in the past on Russia's new territories. Still, two new ones were unleashed after the authorization against Kursk, and Bryansk, one with ATACMS and the other with Storm Shadows. Storm Shadow, of course, is the UK missile, which is similar to the ATACMS in terms of design. Then came the inevitable Russian response. What was that? New multiple hypersonics? Zeus? Superman? Deputy chair of the Security Council, Dmitry, quote, unplugged, unquote, uh, um, um, uh, um, Medvedev could not resist concise trolling. Quote, so that's what you wanted. Well, you damn well got it, unquote. Collective West rats were predictably scurrying all across the spectrum after watching what was first interpreted as an RS-26, quote, conventional
Mhm.
warhead package, unquote, demo. And President Putin went on the record. Key takeaways. Western long range weapons have been used against Russia, which retaliated with a new, uh, um, with a medium range ballistic hypersonic Oreshnik system against the Yuzhmash factory in Dnipropetrovsk. Additionally, the use of long range weapons by the enemy cannot affect the course of the special military operation, the SMO. There, I have to add that the Western long range weapons are not really long range. That is, the ATACMS, they're long range from a tactical point of view, but not from a strategic point of view. The long range weapons have a range of 190 miles, in kilometers, maybe 300, okay, kilometers. The medium range system, which was used by the Russians, have a range of between 1,000 and about 3,000 miles, okay, I believe. Uh, okay, so that is in ballistic missile terms, that's characterized, okay, as a medium range missile, as opposed to a long range missile, but its range is 6 times as long as the ATACMS. So it's important to point that out so people understand.
Mhm.
This was the key relevant message Putin relayed to the Americans, NATO, and the collective West. Quote from Putin: we are conducting combat tests of the Oreshnik missile system in response to the aggressive actions of NATO countries against Russia. The issue of further deployment of medium range and shorter range missiles, which, by the way, the shorter range missiles will still be longer than the long range type of attack. Again, and shorter range missiles will be decided by us depending on the actions of the United States and its satellites. The targets for destruction during further tests of our newest missile system will be determined by us based on threats to the security of the Russian Federation. We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against the military installations of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. And in case of escalation of aggressive actions, we'll respond decisively in a mirrored type of, in a mirrored type of manner. I recommend that the ruling elites of those countries that have plans to use their military contingents against Russia seriously think twice about this, unquote. Pepe puts in as a headline or a title for the next part of his piece here: Sir, would you like some hazelnut salad? The initial interpretation of these de facto game changing moves that Russia had launched a single RS-26 Rubege road mobile missile against the Yuzhmash missile production factory in uh, Dnipropetrovsk,
Mhm.
equipped with 6 independent non nuclear, italics mine, warheads, each in turn deploying other warheads. Call it 6 by 6 equals 36. So a single missile deployed 36 warheads. very interesting in itself, I think.
Mhm.
That in itself changed the quote essence unquote of the war in Ukraine, as Putin himself had previously recognized when it comes to the quote authorization unquote for attacks by attackers. Putin's speech established that Russia, in fact, used a completely new medium range 1,000 to 3,000 kilometer missile. I have to correct myself. I said 1,000 to 3,000 miles before, but it was correct to say 1,000 to 3,000 kilometers, okay, as opposed to miles. So in miles, that's roughly uh, 600 miles to 1,900 miles, or to 1,800 miles, I guess, for the range of uh, 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 the Oreshnik. Uh, okay, the Oreshnik is called hazelnut because it mimics the form of a hazelnut tree. That is the pattern of the attacking modules. Uh, 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 Mimics the pattern of a hazelnut tree as it grows. Even U.S. officials admitted it's an experimental system. That implies they knew something about it. Putin himself also referred to, quote, combat testing, unquote. What is established beyond any testing, in Putin's own words, is that, quote, hazelnut, unquote, may be sent as a gift to any target across NATO. Oreshnik is as badass as missiles get. It may reach the UK in only 19 minutes, Brussels in 14, by the way, Paris in 17, Brussels in 14, Berlin in 11, Warsaw in 8 minutes. And of course, traveling at over Mach 10, it simply cannot be intercepted by anything in the arsenal of the collective West. That includes the US. And there was a tweet from Sputnik about this,
Mhm.
which I'm not going to read completely because it repeats some things that have already been said. I should say Mach 10 is equivalent to 2.5 to 3 kilometers per second. And I probably ought to click on this link to see what more is said on Twitter itself. See if any of that is relevant here. Uh, Countermeasures, modern air defense and missile defense systems, including those in Europe, cannot intercept it. Purpose, tested in combat conditions, there was a response to NATO's aggressive action and the
Mhm.
use of Western weapons against Russia. Target selection, future test targets will be determined based on threats to Russian uh, uh, security. And there's a picture, okay, of the Oreshnik, or something like it anyway, taking off. So let's go back to the article. We have again the picture of the Oreshnik missile taking off. High destructive power is a given,
Mhm.
already guaranteed by the surprise factor. You only know it hits you after you get hit. Uh, 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 Maybe. One potential option is that Oreshnik targeted secret underground workshops uh, uh, at the Uzmash factory, where NATO had sent equipment and parts for short range ballistic missiles from 500 kilometers to 1,500 kilometers. In his 4 books and in his blog, the indispensable Andrei Martyanov has made it clear that, quote, Russia has an overwhelming conventional escalation superiority compared to the hegemon. So yes, this testing of an IRCM, that is to say, a conventional missile, with hypersonic MIRVs, or multiple independent reentry vehicles, may be just a demo, a preview of what else may be in store. And I quote from Andrei Matyanov, quote, NATO has zero capability to stop Russia's long-range fires, unquote. A quote, the demo, unquote, also happens to be paired with a new shot at making war a relatively civil affair. Moscow will warn civilians of any impending Oreshnik strike. Those that won't leave will do so at their own peril. As Andrei Martyanov remarked, quote, this is not anymore just SMO, unquote. Indeed, for quite a while, we have been way past a special military operation. This is a do or die NATO versus Russia hot war, aggravated by the fact that the hegemons ruling elites are congenitally incapable of stop escalating. Even the Oreshnik demo won't stop escalation. A plausible scenario is that the U.S. military intel learned about an impending Russian mid-range ballistic missile strike that informed Kiev and NATO. Moscow then warned the U.S. 30 minutes before the strike. That's the norm to prevent any nuclear misunderstandings. The Americans not only confirmed it, but stressed there was no risk of a Russian nuclear attack on Kiev now or in the foreseeable future. Oreshnik, in fact, is a tacit demo that Russia does not need nuclear power to solve anything in the Ukrainian theater of war. Let's assume that escalation has been controlled for now. Yet we still have nearly 2 months of a completely deranged U.S. administration in power. NATO's congenital dementia suggests escalation will continue. The difference, though, is stratospheric. Now, they don't know if Oreshnik is handing them a business card, comes with a nuclear bomb on or not. For all the inbuilt dementia of the current existing administration, Americans who only understand the world via movies may have forgotten that it was Trump 1.0 who withdrew the U.S. from the INF Treaty in 2019. If the U.S. had remained, Russia would not have been able to develop and use Oreshnik. But now it's hazelnut salad time, everybody. A great way to regulate blood pressure. This was republished from Sputnik by permission of the author, of the representative. I love the way Pepe writes.
I do too. Very effective.
He is so visual, and metaphorical, and he's also so direct. And he tells us about the type of missile we're dealing with here. Not as much as Scott Ritter told us in my last video just yesterday, because Scott was very, very detailed about the technical aspects of the missile. But considering the journalistic background of Pepe, he really did a very good job of giving a general description of the new missile type.
Yes, he did.
And so I think that's a terrific article. So let's go back to our comments and see if we can learn anything more from them. No further comments from Robert or from anyone else. We do have 44 people here now, so I'd like to say to everyone, please don't forget to share, link, and subscribe. and we'd love to see some more comments.
Yes, please, please, more comments.
Okay, for most of you. Uh, and we'd like to see also much more shares so other people can come and join the stream as well. Okay, so we have two remaining pieces. D, which the one that you'd like to take? We have the one about the G20 from Pepe, and we have the one from Jeffrey Sachs on on what ails America and how to fix
Um, it doesn't matter.
it. Okay, so I'll put up the Pepe one for the G20 for you then.
Okay.
Okay, I'll share that, and you can take charge of that.
Okay, I'm just get a drink of water here. Okay, here we go. G20 knocks out G7 agenda. And the G20 summit in Rio earlier this week offered the quite intriguing spectacle of a deeply divided world, geopolitically and geoeconomically, trying to put on a brave holiday in the sun face.
Okay, before we go further, I'd like to add that that photo you see is one of Xi on your left. That is Xi Jinping of China. Okay, and on the right, okay, is Lula da Silva, uh, uh, who of course is the president of Brazil.
Yes.
And okay, this is kind of a melange, a mix, okay, of photos, okay, in this graphic, with the uh, famous statue of Christ overlooking the bay in Rio, and a bunch of flags. I guess those must be flags of BRICS. Yeah, well, maybe they're flags of the G20 actually, because the United States flag is among them. So is the UK flag in Canada. But probably the flags of the G20. And on the right is the credit, okay, to the cradle that actually produced this graphic. So I did want to point that out.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, there was plenty of fluff to amuse attentive audiences. French President Emmanuel Macron, surrounded by a beefy security detail,
Yeah,
stro-
I can imagine that.
yeah, strolling on Copacabana Beach near midnight. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, barefoot in the sand, stunned by the lapping waves. The White House lodger, U.S. President Joe Biden, with his expiry date in less than 2 months, missing the G20 family pic because he was talking to a palm tree.
That's Pepe.
Right before the summit, Biden posed on a sound stage in the rainforest, complete with two giant teleprompters, pledging to save the Amazon, just as his handlers in Washington let leak the quote authorization for Ukraine to attack targets inside the Russian Federation with ATACMS, a qualified preamble for a possible World War III.
Yeah, that is a tremendous irony, isn't it?
Yes,
Amazing.
with Rio providing the ultimately gorgeous set at the very at the very least, tempers at the renovated Museum of Modern Art, the G20 venue with the Sugarloaf in the background, were bound to mellow out. This even allowed for a short, tense handshake between Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a true leader of the global South, and Argentina's President Javier Milei, a U.S. asset who hates Lula's guts.
Right, and vice versa, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. And then China steals the show. The populist Brazilian head of state, whose political capital transcends all barriers, was, of course, an impeccable master of ceremonies. But the real star of the show was President Xi Jinping, fresh from his previous triumph when he was, for all practical purpose, coronated King of Peru during the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Lima, complete with inauguration of the 1.3 billion port of Shanghai, new South American node of the Pacific Maritime Silk Road. As China is all about global connectivity corridors, Shanghai became an instant new motto ringing all across the global south. Beijing's, Beijing's prime role as an engine and cooperation propeller across South Pacific, Asia Pacific, also applies to most of the G20 members. China is the largest trading partner of the 13 APEC economies and is responsible for 64.2% of Asian Pacific's economic growth. This prime role extrapolates to China's BRICS colleagues among the G20, as well as brand new BRICS partner nations such as Indonesia and Turkey, compare with the G7 NATO stand contingent of the G20, starting with the United States, whose main global offerings range from forever wars and color revolutions to weaponizing of news and culture, trade wars, a tsunami of sanctions, and confiscation and theft of assets. So predictably, there was some serious underlying tensions permeating the G20, especially when it came to the face-off between the G7 and the Russia-China strategic partnership. Russian President Vladimir Putin didn't even bother to attend, sending his uber-competent foreign minister Sergei Lavrov instead. As for the Beijing, after 7 years of combined Trump-Biden trade and tech war, the Chinese economy continues to grow by 5.2% a year. Exports now account for only 16% of China's GDP, so the economic powerhouse is far less vulnerable to foreign trade machinations. And the U.S. share of the 16% is now only 15%. That is, trade with the U.S. represents only 2.4% of the Chinese GDP.
So I think that comment is very, very important because it means that China has
Mm.
gotten to the place where its trade with the United States is significant for it.
Mm-hmm.
2.4% is certainly significant, but it is a trade that China would be able to dispense with without getting seriously hurt. So if we decided to break off all of our trading relationships with China, uh, they could still go on. Their prosperity would be uh, um, uh, protected. And I think they would be easily able to replace the trade with us, the trade with South America, okay, and
Mm-hmm.
Africa, okay, and increase trade with India, most probably, okay.
Yeah.
So it's hard for us to hurt them. The question is, how much would it hurt us to interrupt our trade with China? I raised that question, but I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah. Good question. Even under what can be described as NATO stands all-out tech sanctions, Chinese tech firms are growing at warp speed. As a result, all Western tech companies are in deep trouble. Massive retrenchment, factory downsizes, and shutdowns. Meanwhile, China's trade surplus with the rest of the world has expanded to a record 1 trillion US dollars. That's what horrified Western economists qualify as China on a quote collision course with some of the world's biggest yet dwindling economies.
Yes, I don't know what to make of that particular comment. Uh, that trade surplus, okay, is very large, of course, but I'm not sure why Pepe thinks of it as somehow a threat to. I guess the economies he's talking about, okay, are the Western um, 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 economies, okay, but it's not a threat to them unless the Western economies want to shut off trade with China. But if they want to continue trade with China, I don't think it's a threat to them.
Now,
Okay, anyway, let us go on.
okay, efforts to Ukrainize the G20 agenda. The Brazilians had to dodge quite a few precision bullets to extract some success out of this G20 summit. U.S. think tank land on the eve of the summit went on an all out propaganda campaign accusing BRICS nations of doing nothing but posture and complain. The G20, on the contrary, with, quote, all major creditors on the table, might be able to redress, quote, financial grievances and development deficits. The Brazilians were clever enough to understand that an indebted NATO bloc exhibiting less than zero political leadership would do nothing under the G20 framework to redress financial grievances, not to mention contribute to enfranchise global South nations. The only thing that would interest the hegemon's financial elites out of the G20 meeting is to deepen partnerships, a euphemism for further co option and vassalization with an eye on 2026, when the U.S. will host the G20.
Hmm, interesting.
China, just like Brazil, had other ideas, entered the campaign to fight hunger and poverty, officially launched in Rio. The Global Times emphasized how China, quote, has lifted all 800 million people out of poverty and achieved the poverty reduction goals of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development ahead of schedule. In his G20 speech, Xi called all members to, quote, make a fresh start from Rio by practicing, quote, inclusive globalization and true multilateralism. NATO stand as every NATO stand, as every grain of sand in the Sahel Desert knows, simply abhors multilateralism.
Yes, indeed, it does.
Yep. The official theme of the Rio G20 was, quote, building a just world and a sustainable planet. The hegemon's ruling classes, irrespective of who sits in the White House, are not interested in, quote, a just world, only in maintaining a unilateral privilege.
Yes.
That's true. As for sustainable planet, it is code for what the Davos gang wants. The toxic imbrication of interest of the UN, the World Economic Forum, WEF, and NATO. The G7 NATO stand did try by all means to hijack the agenda of the Rio G20, as confirmed by diplomatic sources. Yet the Brazilians stood firm in their defense of global South led multipolarity, negotiating a compromise agenda that, for all practical purposes, evaded getting deeper into the hegemon's latest forever wars, Ukraine and Gaza. With NATO stand as a whole de facto supporting the Gaza genocide, the G20 85-point final declaration could, at best, offer a new consensual generalities. at least calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, which was promptly vetoed by the U.S. at the UN Security Council immediately after the G20 summit's conclusion.
It's shameful, isn't it?
It is. It's horrific.
All these vetoes with a genocide going on.
It is disgusting.
Ridiculous.
Lavrov, at his G20 press conference, offered some extra nuggets. He said that while the West did try to Ukrainize the G20 agenda, other members insisted that other conflicts be included in the final declaration. Those countries reluctantly agreed to discuss the points of the G20 final declaration on the Middle East to West Asia. Indonesia, India, Brazil, and South Africa. Lula's personal imprint at the G20 represented a global South move to establish an alliance against hunger, poverty, and social inequality, and at the same time impose extra taxation on the super wealthy. The devil will be in the details, even as over 80 nations have already subscribed, plus the EU and the African Union, along with several financial institutions and a series of NGOs. The alliance should, in principle, benefit 500 million people up to 2030, including the expansion of quality school meals for over 150 million children. It remains to be seen, for instance, how the AU will make it happen in practice. In the end, to a certain auspicious extent, the Rio G20 worked as a sort of complement to the BRICS summit in Kazan, trying to pave the way towards an inclusive, multinodal world framed by social justice. Lula significantly stressed the key connection, excuse me, linking the latest G20, the global south ranging from Indonesia, India, and now Brazil to South Africa, which will host the G20 next year, bringing, quote, perspectives that interest the vast majority of the world's population. Incidentally, that right there includes 3 BRICS and 1 BRICS partner. On a personal level, it was quite an experience to observe the G20 fresh from the series of rich dialogues in South Africa itself, centered on the construction of African unity in a multipolar world. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa reiterated it when he said in Rio that his passing of the baton from Brazil is the quote concrete expression of the historical, economic, social, and cultural links that unite Latin America and Africa, and unite hopefully the whole global majority.
That was a brilliant piece.
Yes, it was.
Just a brilliant piece. And again, where else could we get it except from Pepe Escobar
Exactly.
himself? Because I don't think anybody else has the wide range, okay, of knowledge uh, going across, so many continents
Yes.
in the world. I mean, the man is just traveling everywhere, and he's absorbed the cultural background of all the countries that he travels to
Hmm.
over a period of years. Okay, he's in his early 70s now.
Okay.
I don't know how long he will be able to travel, okay, in this way. I hope he can keep going forever, but I know that's not possible.
Yes, he's a very effective writer, communicator.
Very effective communicator, very colorful, and also full of information
Oh, yes.
and knowledge. Uh, okay. This was an article that we couldn't get anywhere else except from him.
Hmm.
There was no one else, could have done this. tells us a lot about what is going on in the world that is never covered by uh, the mainstream,
Right, it's hidden from
here
people.
in America, hidden from people by mass media. It has evolved into propaganda organs that
Yes.
typically present either the government or some of the opposition of the government, uh, but in any case, largely ignores what's going on in terms of the international scene. So Pepe is bringing us that. And it's very important that we
Hmm.
have the kind of information that he brings us. Okay, let's see what other comments we have. No, we still don't have other comments. Our audience has expanded to 57, and that's good. But we still don't have any more comments on YouTube. I say to everyone, please share, like, and subscribe
Yes, it's so important.
because that is very important from the standpoint of beating the algorithm. So that's, of course, very important for us. But now let us go to the fourth of our pieces for tonight, which is by fourth piece is by the one and only Jeffrey Sachs, the Columbia professor, certainly along with Pepe, one of the leading thinkers in the field of international relations today. And Jeff's article says, it's titled, What Ails America and How to Fix It. And my apologies to those who think that when we refer to America, we ought to be referring to all of North and South America and not simply to the United States. Okay, but Jeff is here referring only to the United States. Okay, so he starts off by saying America is a country of undoubted vast strengths, technological, economic, and cultural. Yet its government is profoundly failing its own citizens and the world. Trump's victory is very easy to understand. It was a vote against the status quo. Whether Trump will fix or even attempt to fix what really ails America remains to be seen. I'm afraid that I'm not so optimistic as to think that it remains to be seen. I do hope that Trump will fix at least one thing. That is the war that we have in Ukraine, which is becoming so close to triggering a nuclear war. So I certainly hope that Trump is going to fix that, but I'm not encouraged by his nominations to foreign policy positions. It looks like he's putting people who were either neocons or evangelicals into all of the foreign policy positions. And of course, when it comes to Israel, there's not an ounce of difference between the evangelicals, okay, and the neocons.
No.
So, and also when it comes to Ukraine, of course, the present scale of the neocons is kind of signals that it won't be easy for Trump to make peace uh, uh, with Russia over Ukraine. He certainly won't be doing it in 24 hours.
No.
That's not going to happen. But to go on with the article, the rejection of the status quo by the American electorate is overwhelming. According to Gallup in October 2024, 52% of Americans said they and their families were worse off than 4 years ago, while only 39% said they were better off, and 9% say they were about the same. An ABC national news poll in September 2024 found that 65% of Americans said the country's on the wrong track, while only 25% said it's on the right track. In March 2024, according to Gallup, only 33% of Americans approved of Joe Biden's handling of foreign policy. Yes, that's an astonishingly low number, I think, people. At the core of the American crisis is a political system that fails to represent the true interests of the average American voters. What have I been saying all these years? The
Exactly.
system was hacked by big money decades ago, especially when the U.S. Supreme Court opened the floodgates to unlimited campaign contributions. Since then, uh, um, 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 since then, American politics has become a plaything of super rich donors and narrow interest lobbies who fund election campaigns in return for policies that favor vested interests
Mm-hmm.
rather than the common good. Two groups own the Congress and the White House: super rich individuals, single issue lobbies. The world watched agape as Elon Musk, the world's richest person, and yes, a brilliant entrepreneur and inventor, played a unique role in backing Trump's election victory, both through his vast uh, um, influence on the media and his funding.
Mm-hmm.
Countless other billionaires chipped into Trump's victory. Many, though not all, of the super rich donors seek special favors from the political system for their companies or investments. Most of those desired favors will be duly delivered by the Congress, the White House, and the regulatory agencies staffed by the new administration. Excuse me. Many of these donors also push one overall deliverable: further tax cuts on corporate income and capital gains. Many distant business donors, I would quickly add, are forthrightly on the side of peace and cooperation with China as very sensible for business as well as for humanity. Business leaders generally want peace and incomes, while crazed ideologues want hegemony through war. There would have been precious little difference in all of this with the Harris victory. The Democrats have their own long list of the super rich who finance the party's presidential and congressional campaigns. Many of those donors, too, would have demanded and received special favors. Tax breaks on capital income have been duly delivered by Congress for decades, no matter their impact on the ballooning federal deficit, which now stands at nearly 7% of GDP. I have to add here that's probably not high enough yet. It should probably be at least 12 to 13% of GDP. And no matter that, the U.S. pre-tax national income in recent decades has shifted powerfully towards capital income and away from labor income. Yeah, so what we need is another 6% of deficit, which is targeted towards increasing the income of labor. That would be great for the United States. Uh, we always have to remember we're looking, okay, at deficits, the percent, okay, of GDP, that uh, that 7% of GDP, which is represented by the assets, is also a contribution by the government of 7% of GDP to the private sector, or I should say the non-government sector, okay, is the correct statement, okay, of that. And after all, would you rather have a contribution by the government to the non government sector,
Mm-hmm.
or would you rather have a surplus, which represents a contribution by the non government sector to the government? And you have to remember always the government does not need any such contributions because it can create its own money while the non government sector cannot. So there we are.
Mm-hmm.
As measured by one basic indicator, the share of labor income in GDP has declined by around 7 percentage points since the end of World War II. As income has shifted from labor to capital, the stock market and super wealth has soared, with the overall stock market valuation rising from 55% of GDP in 1985 to 200% of GDP today. It's a good statistic from Jeff. The second group, with its hold on Washington, is single issue lobbies. These powerful lobbies include the military industrial complex, I don't know how you characterize that as a single issue necessarily. Yes, it's all in the military industrial complex, but there may be differences in the interests of those who were part of the military industrial complex. Anyway, going on. Wall Street, big oil, the gun industry, big pharma, big ab, and the Israel lobby. American politics is well organized to cater to these special interests. Each lobby buys the support of specific committees in Congress and selected national leaders to win control over public policy. The economic returns to special interest lobbying are often huge. $100 million of campaign funding by a lobby group can win $100 billion of federal outlays and or tax breaks. This is a lesson, for example, of the Israel lobby, which spends a few $100 million on campaign contributions and harvests tens of billions of dollars in military and economic support for Israel. These special interest lobbies do not depend on nor care much about public opinion. Opinion surveys show regularly the public wants gun control, lower drug prices, an end of Wall Street bailouts, renewable energy, and peace in Ukraine and the Middle East. Instead, the lobbyists ensure that Congress and the White House deliver continued easy access to handguns and assault weapons, sky high drug prices, coddling of Wall Street, more oil and gas drilling, weapons for Ukraine, and wars on behalf of Israel. These powerful lobbies are money fueled conspiracies against the common good. Remember Adam Smith's famous dictum in The Wealth of Nations, 1776, quote, people of the same trade seldom meet together even for merriment and diversion, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices, unquote. Adam Smith was very perspicacious about some things.
Mm-hmm.
The two most dangerous lobbies of the military industrial complex, as Eisenhower famously warned us in 1961, and the Israel lobby, as detailed in a scintillating new book by historian Ilan Pape. Their special danger is that they continue to lead us to war and closer to nuclear Armageddon. Biden's reckless recent decision to allow U.S. missile strikes deep inside Russia, long advocated by the military industrial complex, is a case in point. Now, I have to say here, I'm not so sure it was advocated by the military industrial complex. Certainly, Lloyd Austin was opposing inside Russia because we are not ready for large scale war with Russia and not ready for nuclear war either. I don't think it was the military industrial complex. I think it was the deep state. It was their interests, you know, that were being represented here. Now, there may be parts of the military industrial complex that are dedicated to the deep state, and that may be what Jeff is talking about here. But the military industrial complex as a whole, it seems, was not for the further expansion of the war to a nuclear war or to a full scale conflict between the United States and Russia. Anyway, going on with Jeffrey, the military industrial complex aims for U.S., quote, full spectrum dominance, unquote. Its purported solutions to world problems are wars and more wars, together with covert regime change operations, U.S. economic sanctions, U.S. info wars, color revolutions led by the National Endowment for Democracy, and foreign policy bullying. These, of course, have been no solutions at all. These actions, in flagrant violation of international law, have dramatically increased the U.S. insecurity. The military industrial complex dragged Ukraine into a hopeless war with Russia by promising Ukraine membership in NATO. in the face of Russia's fervent opposition and by conspiring to overthrow Ukraine's government in February 2014 because it sought neutrality rather than NATO membership. Again, I'm not sure that was the military industrial complex as much as it was the deep state. The military industrial complex is currently unbelievably promoting a coming war with China. I think that's true, but I don't think they're promoting a nuclear war with China. This will, of course, involve a huge and lucrative arms buildup, the aim of the military industrial complex, yet it will also threaten World War III or the cataclysmic U.S. defeat in another Asian war. While the military industrial complex has stoked NATO enlargement and conflicts with Russia and China, the Israel lobby has stoked America's Syria wars. In the Middle East, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, more than any U.S. president, has been the lead promoter of America's backing of disastrous wars in Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Syria. Netanyahu's aim is to keep the land that Israel conquered in the 1967 war, creating what is called Greater Israel, and to prevent a Palestinian state. I have to introduce a correction here, too. The aim is to keep the land that Israel conquered in the 1967 war, but that is not the Greater Israel they aspire to. Of course, they aspire to that and to preventing a Palestinian state. But the Greater Israel they aspire to right now is the Greater Israel involving territory from the banks of the Nile to the banks, okay, of the Euphrates, uh, and north from uh, 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 from Egypt to Turkey. That's the Greater Israel, the right wing in Israel that's in the ascendant right now has in mind. It's not even simply just taking over Palestine as a one state solution. Their ambition goes far beyond that. So, anyway, this expansion is policy, getting back to the article, in contravention of international law, has given rise to militant pro Palestinian groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Uh, the Netanyahu's long-standing policy is for the U.S. to topple or help to topple the governments that support these resistance groups. Incredibly, the Washington the neocons and the Israel lobby actually joined forces to carry out Netanyahu's disastrous plan for wars across the Middle East. Netanyahu uh, was a lead backer of the war in Iraq. Former Marine Commander Dennis Fritz has recently described in detail the Israel lobby's large role in that war. Ilan Pape has done the same. In fact, the Israel lobby has supported U.S.-led or U.S.-backed wars across the Middle East, leaving the targeted companies in ruins and the U.S. budget deep, okay, in debt. Okay, once again, the national debt, okay, of the United States is not important for the fiscal sustainability of the U.S. government. It has nothing to do with fiscal sustainability. It can be paid off completely as it falls due, simply using either platinum coin seigniorage or overt congressional financing, as I detailed in previous streams. In the meantime, the wars and tax cuts for the rich have offered no solutions for the hardships working of the working class Americans. As in other high income countries, employment in U.S. manufacturing fell sharply from the 1980s onwards as assembly line workers were increasingly replaced by robots and, quote, smart systems, unquote. The decline in the labor share value in the U.S. has been significant, and again, it's been a phenomenon shared with other countries. I'm waiting for him to get to what we do about this. I'm so interested in that. Yet,
Mhm.
uh, 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 American workers have been hit especially hard. In addition to the underlying global technological trends hitting jobs and wages, American workers have been battered by decades of anti-union policy, soaring tuition and healthcare costs, and other anti-worker measures. In high-income countries of Northern Europe, quote, social consumption, unquote, publicly funded healthcare, tuition, housing, and other publicly provided services, and high levels of unionization have sustained decent living standards for workers. Not so in the United States. Yet this was not the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Soaring costs of healthcare, driven by the private health insurers and the absence of sufficient public financing for higher education and low-cost online options, created a pincer movement, squeezing the working class between falling or stagnant wages on the one side and rising education and healthcare costs on the other. Neither Democrats nor Republicans did much of anything to help the workers. Trump's voter base is the working class, but his donor base is the super rich and the lobbies. So what will happen next? More of the same, wars and tax cuts, or something new and real for the voters? Trump's purported answer is a trade war with China and the deportation of illegal foreign workers combined with more tax cuts for the rich. In other words, rather than face the structural challenges of ensuring decent living standards for all and face forthrightly the staggering budget deficit, which again doesn't need to be faced forthrightly. The
Mm-hmm.
only part of it that needs to be faced in a forthright way is that so much of it is going to the rich and the well off. It needs to be targeted, differently, but the budget deficit actually needs to be larger, not smaller. Trump's answers on the campaign trail and in his first term were to blame China and migrants for low working class wages and wasteful spending for the deficits. This has played well uh, um, um, uh, 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 electorally in 2016 and 2024, but will not deliver the promised results for workers in the long run. Manufacturing jobs will not return in large numbers from China since they never went in large numbers to China. Nor will deportations do much to raise living standards of average Americans. This is not to say that real solutions are lacking. They're hiding in plain view if Trump chooses to take them over the special interest group and class interests of Trump's backers. If Trump chooses real solutions, he would achieve a strikingly positive political legacy for decades to come. The first is to face down the military industrial complex. Trump can end the war in Ukraine by telling President Putin and the world that NATO will never expand to Ukraine. He can end the risk of war with China by making crystal clear that the U.S. abides by the one China policy and as such will not interfere in China's internal affairs by sending armaments to Taiwan over Beijing's objections and would not support any attempt by Taiwan to secede. I agree, those would be very good measures, but uh, in order to end the war, okay, in Ukraine, he not only has to make such a statement, he also has to stop the shipment of arms, okay, to Ukraine, and he has to sit down with Putin and to negotiate a new security framework. That's absolutely essential. A new security framework for Europe, okay, including Russia, okay, and including the United States. Probably what needs to be done is for the United States to get out of Europe. The second is to face down the Israel lobby by telling Netanyahu that the U.S. will no longer fight Israel's wars and that Israel must accept the state of Palestine living in peace next to Israel, as called for by the entire world community. Indeed, is the only possible path to peace for Israel and Palestine, and indeed for the Middle East. But here, Jeff should mention, and he doesn't mention, of course, that that's going to require the resettlement of the settlers, okay, in the West Bank, because there's going to be no state of Palestine if they cannot be resettled somewhere else. Uh, it's okay. Uh, the third is to close the budget deficit partly by cutting wasteful spending, notably on wars, hundreds of useless overseas military bases, and sky-high prices the government pays for drugs and healthcare, partly by raising revenues for the government, forcing taxes on the book by cracking down on illegal tax evasion would have raised 625 billion in 2021, around 2.6% of GDP. More should be raised by taxation of soaring capital incomes. Well, I certainly agree with some of that, but we should not be closing the budget deficit. We should be making, it larger, because we need to be targeting large deficits towards the working class, and also to the middle class, and the lower middle class, especially. And uh, uh, I think what Jeff still doesn't understand is that the budget deficit represents a contribution to the non-government sector. So
Mhm.
it enriches, in terms of net financial assets, the non-government sector, of the economy. So the question is, what kind, of budget deficit, and who is it going to enrich? We have to make sure, that a budget deficit. And by the way, I said before that there should be a deficit of 10 to 12%. The reason why I put that particular figure on it is as follows. Previous history shows us that the savings desires of the population, when the population has its druthers, the savings desires run about 6% of GDP per year. Furthermore, the trading desires of the public also run to some, this is just a coincidence, also to roughly 6% per year. We can glean these facts by looking at uh, uh, previous years when we had trade deficits of 6%, and also savings of 6%. Trade deficits of 6% mean that the economy is losing 6% of GDP each year, and savings also means that the transactional part of, 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 of the economy, as opposed to the asset part, of the economy, is losing another 6% per year. So the point is that 12% needs to be made up by the government each year with a deficit of at least 12%. Of course, that deficit has to be properly targeted. That is very important, and we're not doing that right now. We're targeting a deficit much more to the rich and the haves than we're targeting it to the have-nots, who need that kind of contribution from the government. But the point is, if an economist advocates for closing the budget deficit, then what the economist is advocating for is more conflict, more class conflict, because uh, 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 that puts a much higher burden on the raising of revenues of the government, and it also puts a burden on internal political conflicts involving the targeting of the deficit to the right places. And in power struggles like that, it's always true that the people closer to the centers of power, which are the haves, have a much easier time of actually getting a lower deficit targeted towards them. And if the government ever gets to surplus, then it's also true that the people closer to power uh, also get away uh, with having the major burden of the surplus. The major burden of the surplus of austerity, that is always placed on the working class, and also the lower middle class. It is rarely placed on the people who have money in the first place. And we can always see this by observing the sectoral balances statistics uh, going way back to to 1945. So, okay, so anyway, going past this, the third is to close the budget deficit. That is not a solution. We have to increase the budget deficit and target it properly. And the fourth K is an innovation policy, aka industrial policy that serves the common good. I agree. We need
Mhm.
Elon Musk and his Silicon Valley friends have succeeded in innovation beyond the wildest expectations. All kudos to Silicon Valley for bringing us up to the digital age. America's innovation capacity is vast and robust and an envy of the world. The challenge now is innovation for what? Musk has his eye on Mars and beyond, captivating, yet there are billions of people on Earth that can and should be helped by the digital revolution here and now. Core goal of Trump's industrial policy should be to ensure that innovation serves the common good, including the poor, the working class, and the natural environment. Our nation's goals need to go beyond wealth and weapons systems. That's certainly correct. As Musk and his colleagues know better than anybody, the new AI and digital technologies can usher in an era of low cost, zero carbon energy, low cost healthcare, low cost higher education, low cost electricity powered mobility, and other AI enabled efficiencies that can raise real living standards of all workers. In the process, innovation should foster high quality, unionized jobs, not the gig employment that has sent living standards plummeting and worker insecurity soaring. Trump and the Republicans have resisted these technologies in the past. In his first term, Trump let China take the lead in these technologies pretty much across the board. Our goal is not to stop China's
Mhm.
innovations, but to spur our own. Indeed, as Silicon Valley understands, while Washington does
Mhm.
not, China has long been and should remain America's partners in the innovation ecosystem.
Yes.
China's highly efficient and low cost manufacturing facilities, such as Tesla's the Gigafactory in Shanghai, put Silicon Valley's innovations into worldwide use when America tries. All four of these steps are within Trump's reach and would justify his electoral triumph and secure his legacy for decades to come. I'm not holding my breath for Washington to adopt these straightforward steps. American politics has been rotten for too long for real optimism in that regard. Yet these four steps are all achievable and will greatly benefit not only the tech and finance leaders who back Trump's campaign, but the generation of disaffected workers and households whose votes put Trump back into the White House. What I have to say about this is, in many ways, it's a very good article. It's imaginative, it's thoughtful, it's comprehensive, okay, and so on. But clearly, these four steps will not be taken by Trump or any other executive uh, uh, in the United States with getting big money out of politics first. Trump may have a mass base, but let's face it, folks, he doesn't have the kind of mass base that Franklin Roosevelt had.
Right.
He doesn't. He has nowhere near that kind of mass base. Okay. But he does have a huge donor base, and it's that donor base that he serves. And that particular donor base, uh, they may go in for innovation, but that doesn't mean they're going to create jobs that are going to be good jobs for people because they don't particularly want to pay people good salaries when they create good jobs that could be good jobs for people. Okay. Uh, okay. Also, further, uh, with respect to uh, 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 the budget deficit, what's likely to happen with respect to the budget deficit is that uh, Trump's donors will want to have that deficit cut but they're going to want to cut it by imposing austerity on the poor and the middle class, cutting the social safety net, doing that kind of thing. Uh, that kind of closing, okay, of the budget deficit is not what we need. And as I said before, we don't need closing the budget deficit at all. We need an expansion, okay, of the budget deficit, but proper targeting of it. And we can't get that until we get the big money out of politics in the first place. Now, facing down, the Israel lobby. Well, who's going to face down, the Israel lobby? Is Trump going to face down, the Israel lobby? I mean, maybe we'll do so when it comes to if we have a danger of nuclear war there and he gets scared, he may face down, the Israel lobby for a limited period of time in order to get a practical solution for Palestine that involves two states living side by side. There's a chance he might actually do that, but not without a severe struggle first. Okay, and I think we're looking at a crisis here which has to be resolved in the next year or so. If it's not resolved, in the next year, I think we're all going to be gone. Okay, because I think there's going to be a devastating war in the Middle East, which will probably escalate, into a nuclear war. But over time, if there is a settlement there, the Israel lobby will still be here and will still be trying to build up the state of Israel at the expense of the state of Palestine. And the only way to stop it uh, from biasing uh, uh, U.S. policy towards the state of Israel, okay, as opposed to Palestine, the only way to stop that from happening is, again, getting big money out of politics.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't think Jeff is facing up to this. He's just not facing up to this. Also, if we're going to face down the military industrial complex, well, Trump can do that in a limited way, but all that money is still going to be behind doing the opposite, uh, uh, doing what the military industrial complex wants done and not doing what Trump actually wants done. So if we're looking at a 4-year period, we're looking at, okay, a severe struggle. On the other hand, if in 2 years we could get big money out of politics, it would be much easier for Trump or any other president to end wars. So, how to face this comes down more to getting big money out of politics than anything else. And Jeff Sachs needs to face that.
Yes, that's true. The big money has to get out because the U.S., uh, what we're facing is the situation with Russia, and that is serious,
Okay.
extremely serious.
Extremely
As
serious.
you said, I know Scott Ritter has been saying it could be any time. We could just be. A large portion of the U.S. population could be wiped out.
Oh, but he says two things. The first thing he says is that if we have a nuclear exchange with Russia,
Right.
it would probably cost 100 million people. But he also says if we have a full scale nuclear war, and he doesn't think that it could be limited to a nuclear exchange. He
Mm-hmm.
thinks if there is a nuclear exchange, it's going to escalate to a full scale war.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about a full scale war, he thinks what that's going to mean, okay, is the elimination of human beings on the face of the earth. That's what he thinks about that.
Right. So it is serious.
Okay, so it is very serious, but also he has failed to note, I think he must realize it at some level, but he has failed to note that the introduction of the Oreshnik, uh, that missile system has reduced the likelihood, okay, of a nuclear war, okay, in the short run, because Putin doesn't have to use the new nuclear doctrine he created, as long as he can resort to that particular missile system to reply to escalations by NATO. Okay, in other words, with the Oreshnik system, uh, he can first of all decapitate uh, 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 the Ukrainian government with his next strike. If the West still chooses to escalate by sending in troops of its own, not under control of the Ukrainian government, which will no longer exist, he then can escalate by destroying our bases in Poland, the Polish base, okay, and the Romanian base as well, which is the source of missiles coming into Russia. If that doesn't suffice, he can move on to Germany and take out the Ramstein air base in Germany and other bases in Germany that we have now. And if he really gets angry and desperate, he can take out a large part of Berlin with the Oreshkin system without having to resort to nuclear war, having a nuclear exchange at all.
Right.
And if that doesn't suffice, he can move on to attacking Paris and bases around Paris and London and bases around London. And he can take care of Brussels, the center of NATO, okay, as well. I mean, this is a super weapon.
Right. And the thing is, I've seen this article about business. This call for business people, say in Europe, um, to think about um, with this war, the World War III, if World War III to come about. Um, businesses to understand and to analyze.
Yes.
So we're seeing more and more talk about this escalation and Europe trying to prepare itself, and then talking about British troops going going in and all this other. And to me, it's nonsense. It's stupidity.
To me, it's also stupidity. I think what's going on is this. I think the West, okay, including its military, is being fooled by the mass media and the failure of the mass media to cover uh, uh, the introduction of Oreshnik types of missiles. I think the decision makers all through the military have not come to the realization yet that this represents a big change in warfare and a big advantage for Russia. And it places the option of going to a nuclear war squarely in the hands of the West. In other words, Russia no longer has to go to nuclear war uh, uh, to win uh, over NATO. They don't even have to contemplate it, okay, because the Oreshkin middle system of that missile system gives them such a strong advantage. And I think the people who are talking over sending troops into Russia have not yet realized the full significance, okay, of this missile system. But the more that Russia uses it in retaliation for escalations, the more they will come to realize they have no option except to sit down and create a new security framework for Europe. And I'm convinced that's the way it's eventually going to go. It is only uh, what we have to wait for is Russia's continued use of that system to make it clear to the warriors in NATO that they have no chance.
Right. And these warriors in NATO, they're going to end up destroying themselves and their economies with this nonsense, because also you look at West Asia as well, and we've said this several times. The U.S. military itself has said it. We're outstretched,
Yes,
and we're only going to be weakened by all this.
yes, yes, I agree. And again, the Oreshniks can not only be used in Europe, uh, uh, but directly in response, to the interventions um, 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 inside of um, uh, um, in Russia, but they can also be used, in West Asia in order to retaliate for attacks by Israel in various places across West Asia. Okay, or attacks by the United States if we get involved on the side of Israel. Uh, we have we have bases surrounding Iran, every one of which can be destroyed by an Oreshnik. I should say, yes, an Oreshnik, right? Each one of them could be totally destroyed by a single Oreshnik missile.
So we'll end up destroying ourselves.
We will end up destroying ourselves if we persist in this. We have enough leverage now in order to negotiate. So Dawn Foster is saying,
Okay, let
excuse
me.
me, too loud. Okay, I don't think it's Dee's breath. I think it's uh, uh, uh,
Colby's.
yes, Colby's. But Colby is these extremely large dogs. She has three extremely large dogs.
Yeah, I'll just turn my mic off when I'm not talking.
Okay, that'll be fine. Okay, Dawn. Well, thanks for making the comment. So the point I was making is that uh, right now, with the great increase in Russian forces, they're growing up to 1.5 million now, very, very soon. Uh, with the manufacturing advantage in military equipment, which the Russians and Chinese have, and with the new weapon, okay, that Russia now has, and they will be able to produce at least 100 of those over the next year, maybe more than 100. If China gets involved, in the production also, uh, then they might be able to produce a lot more than 100, okay, of these Oreshniks. They can destroy lots of bases with that, lots and lots of bases, without actually destroying populations. In other words, there'd be very small civilian casualties, mostly only restricted to military casualties, but they could do that both in West Asia and in Europe, okay, as well. And that's going to be the future if we don't stop attacking Russia directly.
All right, so we're going to lose U.S. lives for Israel.
Yes, yes. And a good many of those, because I believe those 68 bases surrounding Iran have something like 60,000 military personnel from the U.S. in them. That's a lot of people to lose. And we could lose them. And by the way, one Oreshnik is more than enough to totally blow out of the water, any aircraft carrier and kill all the people on the aircraft carrier. Each of the aircraft carriers has 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier couldn't possibly survive that kind of attack. And remember, the Oreshnik is a precision weapon. It's not like some of the other ballistic missiles. It can be precisely targeted, as it was just a few days ago, to the Yuzhmash factory in Ukraine. John B. says, it appears to me that, quote, the West, unquote, will not change their attitude to, quote, the East until Oreshnik dominance is demonstrated to Western populations by Russia. It seems the only way to break the ambivalence of the U.S. And then he corrects himself to the public ambivalence of the U.S. Yeah, I agree, John B., that might be necessary. But I can't really tell. In other words, it may be one more use of it is going to be enough. In other words, if they decapitated the government in Kiev with one more, okay, of the Oreshniks, it's possible that Biden then will wise up and will say, okay, no more. I'm aware of all of the cognitive deficiencies, okay, of Biden. Okay, I'm aware of those who claim that through his whole career, he was a very stupid man, and there is much evidence to support that. But, okay, I always thought he always had a grain of common sense. I think it's often forgotten, okay, that in the context of the Iraq War, he was not one who was advocating for a terribly aggressive approach in that war. He was for the war, all right. He was supporting it, but he was among those supporting democracy for the Kurds, and he was not one supporting for a continuing war there. He was not for nation building, okay, in Iraq. And he was much more sensible than the others in the Obama administration when it came to what he wanted to do to Iraq. So he has been more sensible than others in certain situations, and he might still retain a grain of common sense in this particular situation. I think part of the problem is that he's not getting properly briefed by Blinken, okay, and by Sullivan. But if the Oreshnik is used the next time, to decapitate Kiev, it might be impossible to hide the full dimensions of the information from him, okay, or from Joe Biden anyway. So that could be enough. If that's not enough, then I think the destruction of the Polish air bases, okay, and the Romanian air bases, then that should be enough to give to greatly discourage the French, okay, and the Polish, and also the United States, because there are U.S. personnel in both of those air bases, okay, as well. Okay, the French are active, in the Romanian air base as well. They're sending in the Scalp missiles from there. Okay, I don't think Russia gave formal notice of 36 hours to the U.S. For the Oreshnik. They are going to give, though, notice to civilians when they go after a target. And I think they are saying they're going to give 36 hours of notice there, so civilians will be able to evacuate the areas that they intend to destroy. That's a point of view which is very civilized, of course, at least in the context of Western Europe. And it wouldn't be so civilized if they were doing it in Gaza, of course. Well, We now have a total of 80 people who have come to the stream, and that is very good. We still have only a few comments. It would be great if we could have a few more before we close out. John B., of course, and Dawn Foster both are perfectly capable of giving us, those extra comments.
See, there's another point of view out there where Trump is concerned, is that the Biden administration wants to continue on where Ukraine is concerned because of all the resources there. So they want to make it difficult for Trump to stop what's going on.
Okay, I know that particular point of view. If more of the Oreshniks are used between now and January 20th, I think the enthusiasm to continue the war, for whatever reason, is going to be greatly dampened. Okay, if the downtown area of Kyiv, Bankover Street, is basically destroyed by the Russians, that's going to give people cause. And if they follow up, with attacks on the new air base in Poland, which just has opened up, okay, it's a missile base. Okay, that's destroyed, and the Romanian base is also destroyed. I think that is going to persuade people that whatever the mineral wealth and the agricultural wealth, okay, of Ukraine is, the West just can't have it. At least not now. If the West wants to take something like that, they have to go back to the drawing board and spend trillions and trillions of dollars to upgrade the offensive forces of the West. I don't think the Europeans are down for that. And I don't think Trump is either. I don't think they want that. I think Trump is going to start listening to what the Colonel McGregor and what he wants to do, with respect to our defensive posture. And what he wants to do is to get out of Europe, to get out of West Asia, and to, concern ourselves with the United States itself and, the Western Hemisphere at most. And so I think that's probably what we're eventually going to do in a Trump administration.
Then you have the group of people that are claiming that if they could keep Trump busy on foreign policy, it'd be difficult for him to implement what the Republicans are talking about, what they want to do.
Okay, I don't know what they mean by keeping him busy with foreign policy. They have to prevent, a total victory by Russia between now and January 20th, because Trump doesn't take office, until January 20th. It seems to me, with the Oreshniks and their conventional military superiority, they're going to get that victory. I don't know if they're going to get it by Christmas, but I think they'll get it before Trump takes office. I don't know whether the Ukrainians are going to be able to stand up to the kind of pressure that they're about to get. Okay, there's news of Russia's also preparing for a final offensive at long last, preparing roughly 180,000 troops for a final offensive against them. Okay, I don't think the Ukrainians can stop that because they're falling apart now, okay, with what the Russians have. If the Russians add another 180,000 well-rested and well-armed troops with all of their advantage, I think, Ukraine is going to fall apart now. And that will be before Trump actually gets into office. So what Trump's going to be faced with, okay, at that point, well, we don't really know. because we don't know the effect that the coming Iranian attack is going to have.
Mm-hmm.
We know that attack is probably going to be coming now over the next 4 days, I think. Very high likelihood it's going to happen then. Okay, now there is, of course, the ceasefire in Lebanon at this point, but the ceasefire doesn't affect uh, 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 the Iranians. I mean, they're still coming, I think, uh, with their 1,000 missiles. And if they deliver those on Israel, I don't know exactly what's going to happen to Israel, but it's going to be total chaos.
I agree. It's going to be total chaos.
So John B. says, with Oreshnik's superiority, the Russians can afford to be generous with their warning. It adds to their effectiveness. I agree. It adds to the political effectiveness of what the Oreshniks are going to do. Don Foster says, I love dogs. And Don Foster says, I'm hoping he will be able to help the U.S. In a major way. I think the he there, I think she means is Trump. Yeah, if he can come face to face with reality and accept it, and he can end the two wars, okay, and then go ahead and get out of NATO, leave NATO to Europe, develop a new security framework as he's leaving, uh, come back home and begin to solve some of our problems here, he will be able to help the U.S. In a major way. It'll even be worth uh, his looting, which undoubtedly will go on in various ways to have that happen. But anyway, here we are, I think. So, Dee, are we done for the evening?
I think so. All we can do is hope for the best. It's just tough times we're in because of these people that are sitting in the decision chairs.
Yes. People sitting in those chairs. We hope the Russians, over the next 4 weeks, can change their behavior by exposing them to a new reality. John B. points out a Russian reply to the latest attacks on Kursk by UK and French missiles is still pending. So that's the Scalp missiles and the Storm Shadows. Okay. I don't know how effective the Oreshniks would be against the Ukrainian troops still present, in Kursk. But I think they're all contained within a relatively small salient. At this point, one or two of the Oreshniks probably would be able to devastate them. It depends on how packed in they are, in Kursk. But anyway, it remains to be seen how the Russians are going to attack this. I'm sure they'll think through any retaliation that they plan. I think the Russians have a way of thinking through things. Russia said they will reply to the source of those missiles. A good point, which means that the source of those missiles well, I don't know here what you mean exactly by the source. The French missiles source is probably the Romanian airbase. I don't know where the immediate source of the UK missiles is coming from. I know the Russians are capable of an Oreshnik attack on London, but I don't think they're going to escalate that far. After saying this, I think if they do, I don't know what kind of effect on the UK that's going to have. It might be too devastating. It might, create a Churchillian kind of response. It might actually be counterproductive in the sense that, it really gets them to continue a war, they just ought to get out of. Anyway, I don't think they're going to actually reply to the UK itself and to France itself with missiles sent their way yet. I think they'll concentrate on air bases where the UK has been active and where the French have been active. For the French, it's definitely going to be the Romanian base. I don't know where it will be for the UK base. But I know the Russians know. I may not know, but the Russians know. John B. says, that's the great uncertainty, Joe. Let's hope they're careful. Well, I got to think they will be careful. Putin has always been careful. I know there are many people in Russia who thinks that he's too cautious. I don't think he's too cautious. I think that caution has probably saved us all. And his prudence in asking for the development of the Oreshniks was also a personal victory for him, because he was very active in getting the military to develop the Oreshniks. He has been over the years just a brilliant leader of Russia. I know a good bit of Russian history. I studied it in school for a full year, and then I read a lot afterwards and took some other courses in Soviet studies as well. So I know a lot about the history, of Russia. And I am here to tell you that I think the greatest leader that Russia has ever had is Vladimir Putin. That is my studied opinion. So take that for what it's worth. I think it's a good historical assessment. And when he became the leader of Russia, it was a broken place. Boris Yeltsin, the American economists, had broken Russia. 10 million people in Russia died because of their policies. The losses are outlined in the book, The Body Economic, which you can find, at Amazon. So, over the years since Putin first took over in 1999, I believe, he has just built it and built it and built it. I mean, it's already 25 years, going on 26 years, and he's still going strong. Anyway, you have to admire the man. or at least I have to.
I do too. The more we've studied foreign policy, like through the media, when we're going to the different regions and listening to people that have been studying the region, like with recent when we hear all this propaganda in the West, but we also look to other sources and his great patience.
And his great patience, yes. John B. says uh, the U.S. broke Russia. The Chicago boys were sent in to dismantle Russia. Not just the Chicago boys, the Harvard boys also. Larry Summers. Uh, Also, Jeffrey Sachs was with them at that time. He was one of the Harvard boys at that time. He was in there. Now, he defends his performance there, and he defends it in a very successful way. I'm not prepared to argue with him concerning that, but certainly the influence of Larry Summers was very baleful. He was instrumental in breaking Russia.
The neoliberalism.
Yes, saddling them, with neoliberal nonsense and ruining the presidency of Boris Yeltsin, absolutely ruining it. And when Yeltsin left and handed over the presidency to Putin, uh, Russia was in desperate straits then. In fact, they had to declare, or they thought they had to declare a default, okay, in their currency. Okay, now we know they didn't have to declare a default, but they did actually declare one, in 1999, and that put them in a very difficult position for a number of years. That was not something necessary. If they had done what the Italians had done in 1990, I think in 1994 and 1995, they could have saved their currency. They wouldn't have had to declare a default. That's a story for another day. I am kind of talked out right now. So thank you all for coming. Oh, John B. says Sachs was suckered by neoliberalist economics. It's a pity he can't admit he was wrong in that uh, regard. In a way, Sachs is definitely not a neoliberal in terms of his attitudes right now. He's in the post-Keynesian camp. When he actually got to that camp, I don't know. But he's never made it to MMT, which by now he should have gotten there. I doubt that he's read Stephanie Kelton's book. If he had, he wouldn't be making his stupid comments about the deficit and the need to close up the deficit. Frankly, he wouldn't be making those stupid comments if he had read any of my books. But he still talks about rampant debt, etc. Yes, I know. I know. Unfortunately, Jeffrey doesn't have time to read. He's too busy appearing on shows and traveling from country to country, doing the best he can, to make the situation better. But he still has fundamental problems in his view of economics. In fact, most of the foreign policy people who were in the alternative media, people who were very sensible about things when it comes to weapons, when it comes to the military, when it comes to foreign policy in general, when it comes to geopolitics. They have no appreciation of MMT, no exposure to it. The only exceptions, okay, are Michael Hudson and uh, the former partner of Max Blumenthal, whose name escapes me right now. He's now operating out of a base in China where he's studying for his PhD. John B. says he still talks about uh, rampant debt. Uh, yes, he does. Okay, there. Oh, Bill Mitchell mentioned Sachs' deficiency in his latest book, Bill and Warren's Adventure, page 304. Thank you, John. I haven't read that book yet, but I will. And but thank you. I'm glad that Bill Mitchell has mentioned Sachs' deficiency because it certainly is an important one. He's very influential now, still, because his views on foreign policy are generally very good. And if maybe he should read Bill and Warren's, isn't it Bill and Warren's Excellent Adventure? Yeah, I haven't actually read that book myself. I think I'd enjoy reading it. I have until recently been doing a series with Warren. Uh, I've been operating as Warren's co host. And we cut something like, I guess it must be up to 15 episodes or something. They've yet to be released, but will be released sometime in the future. I will let you know when. But Warren and I had some very interesting discussions in that particular context. I'm a big fan of Warren's. And also a collaborator from time to time. So there are 82 folks here, down from a high of 83, according to the indicator. So I'm going to say good night for tonight. I'll certainly be back on Saturday. I've pretty well decided I'm going to take off on Thanksgiving Day. I may try to get in a stream either tomorrow night or um, um, on Friday, in addition to the Saturday stream. Uh, I'm getting looks from Bonnie about that, so he's certainly going to have some influence about that. Okay, I know she likes it when I relax, but she also likes it when I stream. So there's that too. I guess it depends on how well I relax on Thanksgiving Day. Okay, because I'm the one cooking dinner. I'm cooking lamb shanks for Thanksgiving.
Sounds interesting.
We do that once a year because normally we don't eat, any red meat. So once a year we indulge in some lamb shanks for a couple of days. It's one of our favorites.
That's good. That's very good. Well, we'll see how things happen worldwide, and I think that will be a determination.
That will be determination too. Okay, if Iran attacks, over the next few days, which I think is a good possibility, I'm sure then I'll find some time to stream. I won't be able to contain myself.
Exactly. Yeah, because I'm really feeling it now too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Madeline and I are going to do a show tomorrow night.
Okay, well, that'll be good.
Yeah, she's got off this week, so she has some time to
What's the
do with her.
subject of your show going to be tomorrow night?
We're going to be talking about one of the things she wants to talk about is with Haaretz, with the publisher, the editor, and how Israel is has put I don't know what you want to call it, um, the government against it, where they can't get
Okay, I think they.
advertisements and stuff like that. It's kind of like a sanctions against the Haaretz. The government's angry.
Yes, I know they're angry. Uh, I'm sure they've been angry for a very long time, but uh, I think they haven't dared to use any sanctions against them until now. But I think now Netanyahu's pretty desperate.
Yeah, he's desperate. So I put a lot of my timeline with Haaretz, and I put the whole article up there because not everybody can get into Haaretz.
Yes.
But it would be a good thing if people have the money too. They got a mass donations all of a sudden, not donations, but people subscribe to Haaretz while he goes after advertisers and stuff like that. That would be quite interesting.
So uh, when you go tomorrow night, are you going to go on at 9:15?
Most likely at 9:15.
Okay. If I decide to go on, then I'll go on at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we well, on Monday Madeline had this class, and she needs time, but she always tells the other person who's doing the class with her, I guess, that you know just I guess they could stop at about 8:30, but it gets dragged on. And then, when you have a show at 9 o'clock, it there's no rest period. So the longest it would go would be to 9. So I said, why don't we just do it at 9:15? That gives her a chance to unwind from what she was previously doing before she starts in.
I think that's a good idea. Also, if I decide to go at 8, then I have a little more time before I start to overlap with your stream.
Right.
So that's good. Also,
Yeah, and like when Madeline and I were talking today, it's just world views. Like we could say, yeah, we plan on talking about that, but we excuse me, something else we would, include in depending on what is happening worldwide. I mean, I don't hold much of a, I don't know, this whole thing with Lebanon with this ceasefire. Where Israel's been concerned with, it's kind of like you've seen this kind of thing before over and over again. They say ceasefire, they say this, that, and the other thing, and then is it going to be real or not?
yeah, yeah. I can't see the Israelis holding to it for too long. But uh, on the other hand, okay, it's Netanyahu. I can't see him holding it for too long. But I know the IDF really wants it because they're exhausted.
Yes, they're exhausted, and plus, they're from what I read, they're low on on ammunition. This is what they've claimed. So, yeah,
Right.
the exhaustion is big, and plus they've experienced a lot of loss of life, a lot. It's
Yes.
just horrible,
Okay.
and injuries.
Yeah, I'm sure Hezbollah wanted it because they feel obligated to minimize the attacks on Lebanon.
Yes, yes. I mean, these attacks, I mean, taking down whole buildings. I mean, there's no need for that.
Yeah, and they're killing too many people.
Exactly.
Okay, so basically they're holding the people hostage, and that was the reason why Hezbollah finally agreed to a ceasefire. Okay, the question is, will Hezbollah stick with the ceasefire if the Iranians decide to attack Israel during this period of time? Or will they then feel obligated to pitch in, to the Iranian attack? Okay, because if the Iranians are firing 1,000 missiles or 2,000 missiles, okay, and Hezbollah can add another 500, that would be uh, that much more serious for Israel.
Hmm. Because Yemen most likely would play a role as well.
Yeah, they would certainly be pitching in.
And then I know the resistance Iraqi groups as well.
Yes. So it's hard to imagine that Hezbollah would stay quiet if that's the situation. The question is whether Iran is going to uh, decide to wait until after the ceasefire is over. I personally think that would be a mistake.
I think it would be a mistake. I don't think they're going to be doing that. I mean, because right now, the way Israel's looking at it is they can focus on Iran and then also Gaza. I mean, Gaza's the one that's,
Yeah, but if Israel attacks Gaza, I think that would be motivation for Hezbollah to end the ceasefire.
well, according to this agreement, it was supposed to be just Lebanon and Israel. Israel didn't say anything about stopping with Gaza.
But if the agreement is between Lebanon and Israel, and Hezbollah is not directly involved, then the attacks, uh, the war between Hezbollah and Israel might well continue.
Yeah, I understand your point of view, but they're saying that they just kind of left it saying that it was going to be a cease, that Hezbollah was not going to be, they were going to have their ceasefire. But like you said, the fact is that if they do, Israel has said that they're not going to stop what they're doing in Gaza. So pretty much, that's pretty much them signing something, an agreement, claiming an agreement that they're not going to keep.
If they're, I guess we have to see the terms of the agreement. As of now, we don't quite know what the terms of the agreement are. Okay, but I don't see why Hezbollah would allow the ceasefire if Hamas was still getting attacked in Gaza. But I did see a headline today saying that Hamas had approved the Hezbollah ceasefire. I'm not sure what that exactly means.
They probably have other that other things going on. I know that they've been really active, obviously, the resistance Hamas with causing a lot of damage to Israel as well. To a lot of the uh, you know the soldiers in there. They're
Yeah, there was a news item today that Hamas was destroying a number of Israeli platoons.
yes, 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 yes. So and there's a lot of soldiers I read that do not want to go back into Gaza. They
Uh,
refuse to go back in.
yeah, they refused to go back in. So that is actually stopping too.
Yes.
Okay, but I mean, I still think Iran has to complete the retaliation.
And I think that may be a big factor in all of this too, knowing the Iran attack is coming, and they're saying they keep claiming saying it's going to be huge, it's going to be big, it's something that Israel could never envision. So they keep bolstering how big it's going to be.
Well, I think they're ready. In other words, in terms of their hypersonic missiles, I think they're ready for a really big attack. I think they'd use the hypersonic missiles first, to disable, whatever air defense is left in Israel. You lead with that, lead with attacks on the military targets, and then come in with their other missiles, with a lot of other ballistic missiles that are not hypersonic. If the air defenses are out, though, they don't have to be hypersonic anymore. But that would be a devastating attack.
Right. And we heard yesterday that there was movement. There was movement. It was reported all the movement going on. So they know that they're preparing, that it's going to be soon.
Yeah, that's what I had heard too. Okay. Also, it's important from the standpoint of uh, a learning experience for Trump and his people. It's a learning experience for Biden and his people too, but I think even more for Trump, okay, and his people. If they see that Israel is in very, very poor shape, and they see the devastation that is wrought by that kind of Iranian attack, and then the military, joins in the discussion and gives them the capability of what Iran can do to our naval vessels in that area, I think the Trump team, might be motivated to seek a two-state solution and to have peace in West Asia. I mean, I know they won't like to do that. I know there are going to be counter influences on them. I know the military industrial complex is going to be important in wanting to continue any war. But if the Iranian attack is really devastating uh, and strikes at the viability of Israel as a nation state, and Israel is left in a highly chaotic state, I hope the reality of that will sink in for them. Because even if Iran fires 2,000 of their missiles at Israel right now, that's only a small fraction of Iran's capability. I mean, they can do it again and again and again, just like Hezbollah can fire, 500 missiles, drones, and rockets, uh, uh, 500 a day. I mean, 500 a day for a year.
And they did serious damage yesterday.
They did serious damage with that attack yesterday.
Yeah, that was real serious to their military bases. It was really serious.
Yeah, and if they could do that every day, if they could do that continuously for a month, that alone would create chaos in Israel without even the Iranian attack. So, I mean, I think Israel is really near the end where they're going to have to sue for peace. So I think it's important that uh, Hezbollah and Iran come in heavily now. Not give the Israelis a respite. From a military point of view, I think that's very important.
Oh, it is very important because we know what Israel does. We know we've been watching them. We see what they've done to Gaza.
Yeah, we see what they've done, but also in terms of the devastation in Lebanon, the Israelis are doing that with their planes. Okay, but if the Iranian attack is successful enough there will be no more planes because there will be no more air bases for the planes to fly from.
And that's what they have to do.
That's what they have to do. But I think a missile attack uh, involving 2,000 missiles should be capable of knocking out all the Israeli air bases and, destroying all the planes at those air bases. And if the Iranians don't really telegraph it, then they should catch a lot of those planes on the ground. That's going to end the casualties in Lebanon.
All right, so it's like they said, it's something that Israel could never fathom. It's going to be it's going to be huge.
Okay, well,
Oh, on that note, I think we should go to sleep, rest up, and face tomorrow as a new day.
tomorrow's a new day.
hmm Good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Good night, Dee.
Yes, rest well, everyone. Thank you for being here. And share, share, share.
And like and subscribe too.
Yes.
And thank you, everyone, for coming. And I'll certainly be here again on Saturday. I might be here sometime before that. So please watch for me because if I do come on, it won't be at a regular time.
Right.
It'll probably be at 8 o'clock on, one of these days. Next Saturday, though, this coming Saturday, I'll be on at 9 as usual.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you again, and thank you, Joe. It was a
Okay.
good
Thank
show.
you,
We
Dee, for
talked about a
coming.
lot.
Yeah, it was a really good show. I loved it. Okay. Thanks, Dee.
You're welcome. Good night.
Okay. Good night. Okay, good night, all. I will end the stream now.